I will tell you, I'm going to walk around a little bit because, like, my nervous energy, and I'm greatly excited about telling you this story and letting you know how this kind of all came about. Because maybe the first thing you thought was like, oh my gosh, like, how did we get here? And even when I think about it, I just think, like, it's amazing what has happened. So this story actually started in 2018. So in 2018, I don't know if those of you who know who Denny Lowe is, but Denny Lowe was an electrician at Caterpillar. He retired. He became our maintenance man. And Denny Lowe came to me and said, and many of you probably know this, Father, we've got lots of leaks. In fact, our roofs, specifically in the flat roofs, so the cry room, the old social hall, the gathering space is all flat roofed. Kryling Roofing Company is not actually on staff, but they pretty much are. Because when it rains really hard, we just put buckets out. And at one point, I don't know which priest did this. We don't throw priests under the bus. I mean, at least not publicly. But anyway, a priest actually, somehow they said, hey, spray this foam on there, and the foam will take care of all this. And so they sprayed the foam on there, but now that foam dried up there. And so Kryling then said, the only thing you can do is rip all these roofs off. It's the only way we're going to be able to deal with this. So when we started this issue, we said, well, is that all we want to do? Do we just need to replace 3 roofs? And if that's all we need to do, that's all we need to do. But we figured, okay, what else would we look at if we could? We knew we had those structural issues. And we knew we had to get at those roofs. But the other things we thought about is, well, how would we expand seating? I mean, our parish is not getting smaller. So and you've heard this probably, right? So in 2007, we had 550 families. We now have currently 1,300 families. So you're one of the largest parishes in the Diocese of Peoria. And what's crazy is, many of you may not, you can tell those stories. This used to be a small country parish. I mean, I'm from Bradford. Like, we'd go by here, and Peoria was 5 minutes that way. And now we've seen all the growth that's happened. So we're like, okay, can we get more seating? What's that look like? And then the third thing we wanted to look at is aesthetics. Like, can we make it look, more beautiful? How are we going to engage disciples for the next generation, which ultimately is our goal? How we're inspiring people, how we're engaging worship for Christ. Now, with that, we decided, okay, we've got these 3 goals, 3 things that we want to look at. We need to put the team together. So we did. We put a building committee back together, and it was pretty much the same building committee we used for our 2 phases of our school. So Ron became, the head of our project, and we had Danny Van Buskirk, and now I'm going to go down here and run into this issue, which I always do. Nellie Gould was on it. Kenny Ethington was on it. Tom Walschmidt was on it. Father O'Brien, Sister Maria Suso. Mead. Darn it, Mead. Are you here? Yes, sorry, Mead. I've gotten you in other ones, but then I've missed other people. So there you go. Anyway, we had these guys on our committee, and we put it together, and we said, here's what we're looking at. And I put one caveat on the process. And the one caveat I put on the process is, whatever architect we decide to bring in, I'd like him to be an architect who actually has done, like, Catholic churches before. So not just any architect, but an actual Catholic church architect. Father O'Brien at that point, I don't know if you remember who he is, but just kidding. So anyway, he piped up at that time. And he said, when I went to Mundelein, I took a class on Catholic church architecture. And he's like, I could talk to my teacher and find out the different architects we could look at. And we're like, okay. And so that's what we did. And we interviewed these different guys. So one guy was out of Rockford, I think, and Chicago, and there was South Bend, Columbus, Ohio. This is the guy we chose. So this is James McCreary. And you can see him here. Actually, that picture is a few years back. He's grayer than that now. I will tell you that. And he's not here, so I can say that. But anyway, here's where I want you to notice. Notice, first of all, January 10th, this is when, in 2019, this is when he proposed to us, right? This is when he made his pitch. And notice where he's from, Washington, D.C. Now, when we started down this road, of course, we bring in this guy, and I should tell you, like, when I show you some of the buildings he's done, this is the cathedral in Knoxville, Tennessee, right? So that's a great church, right? And then he did this one in Aiken, South Carolina, and that's a great church. And those are all great, but I mean, it's kind of like, oh, here's Nebraska, by the way. There's the Newman Center at the University of Nebraska for you Cornhusker fans, right? So he did that. And then we started talking and we said, okay, that's great, but we're not going to be able to build the cathedral. Like, so what can we do? And then we saw he did this. So this was a church at St. Anne's in North Carolina. And he took this church and made it that church. He took this church and made it that church. And when we saw these pictures, we said, hey, that church looks a little bit like our church. And we'd like it to look like that church. So maybe we bring in this guy and we have a conversation. And by the way, what he did was he took this and chopped off the roof. And then he added on to this to make it that. And that's what they did in South Carolina. So we felt really good. We bring him in. We're like, okay, this is exciting. We can start this process. We can see where we can go with our church. And we didn't know exactly where we would go with our church. So then he comes to us, and of course, he asked that great architectural question. How much can you spend? And of course, we came back with the best answer we could give, which is, we don't really know how much we can spend. We're not sure. Like, we spent 4.7 on the first phase of the school, 3.5 on the second phase. Like, can we spend that much? Like, how much is that? Where's that at? So we said, why don't we do this? Let's go through a process, and then we'll figure out, like, what avenue we'll go down. And the process is called good, better, best. So if you could do good with our church, what would you do? If you could do better with our church, what would you do? And if you could do best with our church, what would you do? And this is where we went. By the way, you need to be clear here. I need to be clear here. This is not our architectural drawing. This is Father Henahan's chicken scratch. This is Bradford, 1989, class of 1989, showing you how this conversations went. I should tell you, and this is actually Father McShane, these are what I drew out when I was giving this talk to donors, and he took a picture of it to put up here for me to explain it to you. So anyway, when you look at this, and I'll take you through good, better, best. Here's the gathering space. This is the old social hall. Here is the cry room and sacristy and nursery, and this is the actual church. So when he said, okay, let's look at what we would do with good. Initially what he said is, well, what we'd probably have to do is we could cut back into here, and we cut back into here, and then we tried to make your sanctuary look a little better, but he said, you're really limited on just space. You know, with walls and stuff like that, you're not going to move them. And I'm sure you realize this, I mentioned already, we're a small parish. This church was built as a small parish church. So when we looked at this, initially the committee didn't like it at all. And the reason they didn't like it at all is because this is a 20-foot ceiling and this is a 10-foot ceiling. So to change, to cut into that old building and to make these not look like afterthoughts seemed to be something we weren't going to be able to get to. In fact, they even used that, like, these would be lower roofs, and it would kind of look like left field and right field and adding back. So we said, well, if that's all we can do, maybe we shouldn't do anything. So we were like, we don't really like that good approach. What would you do if you did better? Better was tear this down. Tear the roof off. Build this back up. Add a roof back on that's in a rectangle form. Reorientate the church this direction and put an altar right there. Now, we like that because when we initially started with this, we said, well, what would that look like? It could look like this. And we said, okay, that's not bad. And we like this because it's not the best, but it's still better. It might be staying in our price range. And by the way, good was considered around $2 to $3 million. Better was around $5 to $6 million. So we said, well, 5 to 6, that might be in our price range. We feel pretty good about this. Let's develop this plan. We did for about 6 months. Then it got to be January of 2020. It's not COVID yet, so don't I know everybody went like, well, that's COVID, that's terrible. Not yet. So it's January 2020. We're developing this plan, and then the architect said, well, now you got to bring in a contractor. And you have a contractor look at the plan, they price it out, they talk to their subs, they let you know what it's going to cost, and you go forward with it. So we did. We interviewed different contractors. We selected PJ Hare. A few reasons we picked PJ Hare, to be honest with you. 1, their presentation was amazing. The reputation is solid. And 3, the guy who would be their project manager is Mike Kreutz. And for those of you who know or maybe you don't know, Mike Kreutz is a member of our parish. He's been a member of our parish for a long time. I did his daughter's wedding, and I like the fact that we have our guy, right, that we trust our guy. And he was at one of our other receptions, and I said, Mike, just to let you know, I'm going to give everybody your address. So if we have any issues with the building, they're coming to your house. And he laughed, and I said, yeah, I'm not kidding. Like, this is what we're doing. So anyway, I do love Mike Kreutz, and he'd be a part of this. When PJ Hare looked at this, they said, Father, I don't know if we'd recommend this to you. Because here's the deal. The architect thought maybe we could save our walls by doing it this way. That saved money. PJ Hare said, we don't think you're going to be able to save your walls. And when we start cutting into this old building, we're going to find issues you never thought you had. And you've got antiquated systems, or at least older systems in this, and how we connect them, and what that looks like. Your contingency, we're going to have to make a huge contingency. And they said, if you go down this road, you might consider doing something. You know, if you're looking at this, you might as well consider a tear down. Now, at that point, I literally turned white. Because I'm like, oh no. Like, can we do that? Can we afford that? Is that even a possibility? Because, you know, if we're going through this whole thing, and I literally just said to myself, like, maybe we just go back to 3 roofs. I don't even tell the people, we just keep going, right? And that don't think that wasn't a thought, that was a real thought, but we said, let's at least develop it and see what happens, right? So we developed it, and we said, okay, if we were to do it, this is what it'd look like. And there's a couple things you'll see that we said were priorities for us in this process. One, connection. You got to have a connection, right? You got to be connected at Hettinger Hall. You got to be connected for the school. So we figured whatever we do, that has to happen. Second thing that we felt was really important was this piece, right? The rotunda. We really do believe that community, that gathering space is important to our parish. That it really functioned well. It also joins all the buildings, so that's important. Even though that does create a little conundrum for your architect, because as he will tell you, like most churches have a front facade, not 2, right? So it makes it a little unique. So, you know, he designed it. You've seen the pictures of it, right? And we can look at this. But then when you get there, you're like, okay, you got pretty pictures. I can show you that we got a church that actually has seating for 200 to 250 more. It's all energy efficient. It's all going to be brand new. It's going to set you up for the next 75 years. But can you pay for it? Because ultimately, that's the thing. I can design pretty pictures, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. And by the way, when we got here, PJ Hare said this building would cost $7 million, and this building would cost $1 million. Now, they've since said this building cost $8.5 million, and this building cost $1.5 million. And we've even added on to that, another $500,000. I'll show you that. So then the building committee used what I consider to be bad words. It's okay, I'm not going to swear or anything. I know you're a little sensitive, but it's okay. Hang on. The bad words that they were going to use is, Father, maybe we approach this in phases. No! I don't think my heart can take phases. I'm not going to be able to do phases. And I literally thought, like, when are we going to do this? Like, okay, because we thought maybe we'd just do this. Right? It's $8.5 million. Right? Maybe that's what we do. And I should tell you first and foremost where the parish has been financially. So in 2010, when I came, we had $176,000 in the savings account, checking account. We currently have $2.9 million in the checking account. So the finance committee said, whatever we do, we want to use $2 million of our own money. So we're like, okay, if this is 8.5 minus 2, that's 6.5, but 6.5 is still a lot. And what do we do, and how do we do this? And so I said, well, we looked at good, better, best. Let me go talk to a few people and see if we have some lead gifts that will put us in a position to be able to do this. If not, we go back and look at better, or we go back to good. So I did. And when I showed these pictures and I talked about this, I got $1 million pledge. Now that did 3 things, by the way. Because this was like a year ago, and I got $1 million pledge, and I came home, and literally Father O'Brien and I were jumping in the rectory. If you can imagine that, it's true. Even one of our people who had lunch with Father O'Brien this past Saturday said, is it true? And he's like, it was the Flahertys, actually, and he said, yes, it is true. We were stoked, and then I was scared. Because I'm like, now we got to do this, right? And I got $1 million pledge, and I was like, what are we going to do? And I said, well, I don't like phases. So I went to another donor. And I said, hey, if we get another lead gift, I'm going to go for this too. And we got another $1 million pledge. So now we had two $1 million pledges. We had $2 million of our own. Then I kind of said, okay, I'm going to have to do whatever it takes at this point, because now we're going. Because at this point, I got to bring it to you because I got two $1 million gifts. So then I said, okay, who are parishioners that are good to us that, are still somewhat committed to St. Jude? And so I flew to North Carolina. I didn't fly to California, but I was going to fly to California. I met the California person in Chicago. These are former St. Jude parishioners, and it's interesting because I thought, will they be willing to give? What are they going to do? And, what would they, consider? And what I found so amazing because of COVID when I went there is they said, Father, we never really left St. Jude, right? It's COVID. We YouTube St. Jude every weekend. St. Jude is our parish. That's $800,000 more that came from those trips. Then from there, it was just amazing. Here's crazy. Holy Thursday. Now this is the part literally I get divine providence and whatnot. Holy Thursday, the day we celebrate the Eucharist, the day we celebrate the priesthood, $500,000 gift. Right? And then I'm like, okay, and then what's interesting is Father O'Brien, it was so funny because he's like, man, look at your average. You're averaging $400,000. If you can just get a few more people, we're there. And I'm like, this is not how it works, Father. Just to let you know, this is not how it works. But having said that, you already kind of heard, right, with all our pledges and where we currently are, we're $2.1 million away. And that's 70 pledges. So 70 pledges has us there, which means we have an opportunity to do something. That's the way I constantly talk about it. We have an opportunity to do something we would never be able to do. I even think of well, maybe we should wait, or maybe we shouldn't do it, or all these different things. And of course, you realize I'm the one who does wake up in the middle of the night going, do we do this? How does this look? Right? But then I think, when are we going to have this all kind of to work in that direction and have that opportunity? Here's the other side, by the way. There's your connector piece. And here's the basics. You've seen this. I need to be clear. First thing, we don't know if it's going to look exactly like this in terms of color. The architect initially made it pretty bland so that you wouldn't have a color in your head. So if we put blue on the ceiling and you didn't get blue on the ceiling, you'd be like, we didn't get a blue ceiling and we're mad. Just FYI. So this is the basic structure. This is what it's going to look like. But there will be probably some more color in various places and stuff like that. Also know that this doesn't come with art. And this is the thing you have to realize. So $2.1 million gives us the basic church. And so the idea was, let's set it up for the basic, and then what would we grow into? Here's the crazy part. Let me show you St. Anne's in Charlotte. So this is St. Anne's in Charlotte. Remember, I showed you those pictures. This is what it was initially. This is what it is now. Now, the crazy thing about St. Anne's, even when we talked about this, and this is where we thought, well, if we could build something simple and then add to it, right? And if we get what we need, and then if we get a little extra, do we add? What do we add? Maybe we can add scripture around the inside of our building. How cool would that be? What would that look like? By the way, you want to know the crazy part of even the St. Anne's thing? So Mike Kreutz called St. Anne's in Charlotte. Father's called St. Anne's in Charlotte. And Mike Kreutz came back to me and said, Father, do you know the artist of St. Anne's in Charlotte, where he's from? I said, no, Mike, I don't know where the artist in St. Anne's in Charlotte is from. He said, Peoria, Illinois. So this is the artist who did Sacred Heart. This is the artist that did St. Mark's. So we've already been in contact with him. His name's Andrew Hatterman. And we started looking at, okay, what artistic plan would we do for the church that if we go over $2.1 million, what happens? And see, that's the way we look at this, is 2.1 is basic, and it's good. In fact, it's not just good, it's really good. And then what would we add? Here's the gathering space. First of all, I'm stoked about this. And even when the architect designed this, you realize, I'm sure, he saw a baptistry. So if you go to Europe, you know that baptistries are typically outside of the church, right? Because it's through baptism that you enter into the church. We then thought, well, if we get a little extra money, what do we paint around the rotunda, the inner part? And by the way, what's the scripture that would go there? This is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. And every time you come back to your fundamental identity as a child of God. Outer part of the rotunda. Your mission. Go therefore and make disciples, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Every time we come into the church, we're enlivened by the gift and graces that God gives us to be sent out. Even when Andrew Hatterman looked at this, he said, Father, I want to paint that a gold leaf paint on the inside of the dome. He said, do you realize how that light's going to hit that gold and it's going to come? And as you stand in that space, it's just going to move throughout the day. And I'm like, no, Andrew, I didn't realize that, but that's very good. I'm glad you did that. Of course, that's adding to it, right? Inside, what would we do? And I'm going to take you crazy now. And by the way, I'll determine, or I'll give a prize away. It's actually no actual prize, but I'll be impressed. I'm going to go ludicrous speed on you. Name that movie. Which one? Oh, this. That's my choir director. Very nice. We're very like-minded, at least. I think David Wayne also knew. Dave, did you know? Yeah, I could tell right away. I can see that. Nick, did you know it was Spaceballs? Okay. Leslie, he knew. So we do. No, just kidding. So anyway, you notice there's no stained glass windows. So we talked about, like, well, could we get stained glass windows? What would stained glass windows look like? What would we want to do if we had stained glass windows? And so when we talked to the architect and when we talked to the artist, they both said the same thing. If you're going to get stained glass windows, you should get stained glass windows from one place. And the answer, by the way, is not Peoria on this one. I wish. The answer is Munich, Germany. They have an office in New York. And so, by the way, just to let you know, the plan is, can we get one window and set it in motion? So maybe it takes 6, 8, 10, 12 years. But then we have a church that we're going into that actually is something that inspires and enlivens. Even when I talk to Munich, Germany, and by the way, this is not normal. Like, I've only made that Munich, Germany phone call one time in my life. And I'm on the phone with these art people who are stained glass window people, and they said, Father, what is the plan you have for the stained glass windows? What story do you want to tell? I was like, I don't know what story. Like, first of all, I've never been asked that question, and I'm like, I don't know, Jesus, Mary, do we throw a Joseph in there? Like, what are we doing? But then we thought about it more, because, you hang up and you're like, man, they probably think I'm not very smart, and whatever. So I said, translation, like, they're German then? No, I'm just kidding. So we thought about this, and we said, what story do we want to tell? We went back here, and we said, our identity, mission. Here we said, encounter, mission. So left side, the encounter with Christ. Different people biblically who encountered Christ, and it changed their life. It changed their direction. It changed everything they were about. Right side, them going out on mission. By the way, some of these windows we even figured would be mirrored. So left side window, you've got Peter and Andrew, and they're meeting Jesus on the shore, and they're pulling in their nets. Right side window over here, Peter being crucified upside down in Rome. Left side window, Mary Magdalene wiping the feet of Jesus with her hair. Right side window, Mary Magdalene at the resurrection. The first one to encounter the resurrection. And what does Jesus say to her? Go tell your brothers. She goes on mission. Left side, Paul falling off his horse. Right side, Paul preaching at the Areopagus in Greece. Left side, first window. Of course, the Blessed Mother, the first disciple, the Annunciation. Right side, last window, right before you walk out. The Blessed Mother culminating in heaven. All the saints. All Saints Day, by the way. She's the queen. She's our mom. That's the culmination of mission. That's where we go. We mission so as to share in his kingdom. Some of the other windows we actually are still putting thought into, and we don't necessarily have them mirrored. But we figured, like, okay, maybe we have an image of, like, Jesus with the children, right? Because, of course, we want to reflect different connections or, encounters with God. Maybe the woman at the well. Right side, of course, St. Jude. Maybe some modern ones. Fulton Sheen, Mother Teresa. And then, of course, even in the center, we don't know exactly where we're going to go, but I told you this artwork is not included. The artwork we are looking at for doing over here, by the way, is the Nativity, so that you could always look upon when Christ took on flesh. So this would be above the statue of Mary. And just to let you know, these statues are white, but That's just Tom Walschmidt putting placeholders in there, right? So don't think like we're having white statues or something like that. But this would be the nativity. This is the flight into Egypt. So as Joseph protected the family. But the center, so the whole idea of encounter leading on mission, what strengthens us for mission? Certainly the altar, right? The Eucharist. That every time we come in there, we encounter our Lord and we're sent on mission. And then what's the image of actually? Pentecost. Because we're St. Jude, right? We're the fire. So the fire that fell on, and you know this, hopefully you do, right? St. Jude is the only apostle that's often depicted with the fire on his head. The other apostles didn't. Why? Because his full name is Judas. So it was kind of like, no, I'm the Judas that the fire fell on, not the other Judas. By the way, you also know that's why he's the patron saint of lost causes, because you would only turn to him, you would only turn to Judas if you were desperate. And that's what they did. So that's the idea, that's the plan, that's the whole idea of trying to engage and allow people to go forward. A few things I want to say on remember I told you we added an extra $500,000 and here it is. So when we thought about the actual design of the building, we realized there's parts of like the old social hall, right, that we might lose, or there's parts of like, the storage in different places. So we actually, since we're doing a tear down, you move the rotunda over like 20 feet, we're adding on to this education wing. A few things I want you to notice. So this is a large meeting room. This is a kitchenette. So you lose a kitchen, but you pick up a kitchenette. That kitchenette has a full fridge, would have a full freezer. Notice the lock-off for the school is pushed further back. So you could have a Bible study and not even go into the school. Also notice more storage, right? These are brand new restrooms. And then either more storage or more meeting, offices. Notice that the connection center goes inside a little bit. That does a few things for you. One, what it does is it keeps things kind of clean in this room. And then also you have a door. So just kind of like, I don't know how your mom was when you were a little kid, but when you cleaned your room, sometimes you shoved it under the bed. Well, the connection center, you can close the door and make it cleaner in that room. Weddings, funerals, things like that. And lastly, another meeting room back there. So that's pretty much the project. And really, of course, what I'm asking you here for is 3 Ps. And the number 1 P, hopefully you know, is pray for the project. Ultimately, I know if this is God's work, and I've been doing this for the last 3 years, and I've just seen a little bit of like how it's gone, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is crazy. To continue to pray for it, and then to see, like, even before I come in here, I always go to the church first. And be like, God, is this what you want? Like, I'm gonna go like ask for it. So ultimately, I want you to pray for the project as well, and really, what are we trying to do? Engage the next generation. Somebody said to me the other day, and actually this is a cat guy. I don't know what his job was, but maybe I'll tell you what he said, and then you tell me what his job is. But we talked about, hold on, let me see if I can get this right. Baptisms. It was baptism, funeral, BTO. It was baptism to funeral. That's what it was. So we have about 70 to 80 baptisms every year, and we have around 20 funerals. This past year, we actually had 23. And he said, Father, that's a great BTF, baptism to funeral ratio. And then we talked about it, and I said, if you went to my home parish, I bet it's like 40 funerals to 2 baptisms. So in a sense, what I mean by that is, these are the parishes we really want to engage. These are the parishes that we really want to say, okay, these are the places that have babies. These are the places that have those families. This is where we really want to engage as much as we can so that we can build up the kingdom. And of course, along with that, I want you to promote that. You guys know by coming here, you know the story. You know a little bit about this. You can be those promoters for this. I told this story to Andy Wendling, and some of you may know Andy Wendling, but Andy was so excited because last week he was at a visitation that was in this room, and he emailed me after the visitation. He's like, Father, he said, just to let you know, I just did some work tonight. And I'm like, what did you do, Andy? And he emailed me, and he said he was in line for the visitation, and he heard someone behind him say, can you believe they're going to tear down the church? And Andy said, have you seen the plan? Do you know what they're going to do? Do you realize how it is? Do you realize the benefactors? Do you understand you're getting more seating? Do you understand the efficiency? And what's interesting is the guy then came to the reception like the next day, and I told this story, but because I didn't know who the guy was, and the guy said, Father, that's exactly how it went down. And I'm like, do you believe it now that you know the story? He goes, it does make sense now. And I went back to Andy and I said, thank you, Andy. And that's where I want you guys to consider, like, somebody who wants to, by the way, people sometimes dodge us a little bit. So if you're like, Father, just, we'll tell anybody the story. So just let us know and really be those good voices for us. And then a third, of course, is figure out where you're going to participate. Parish at large, we're going to ask people to consider a $6,000 gift over 3 years. But we also know, and this is what I do know, $2.1 million is a lot of money. Sometimes it feels like it's not a lot of money because you say 10.5 and we only need 2.1. But also know we don't want just 2.1, we want to go over, right? I want a window. And I can talk to you about the cost of what that is, but maybe we'll wait for Q&A on that kind of stuff. So I want you to pray about your gift. I want you to think about your gift. I want you to be, as generous, because the more you stretch, the better we do. So we know if we can get a 10 or a 25 or a 50 or 100, we know that then we're going to really be able to get to a place that we want to be. So thank you for your attention. Hopefully I didn't talk too long. I definitely